You don't need flow to perform at your best. If you follow Andrew Huberman, you may have heard his recent conversation with Dr. Tommy Wood, where they talked about something called a clutch state. And I loved hearing this conversation because clutch state comes out of the sports psychology literature, and it highlights something I think athletes need to hear more often. Flow is not the only great state where great performance happens. Hi, I'm Dr. Haley Perlus if we haven't yet met. I'm a sports psychology coach, and really my intention is to help you get your head straight so that you can perform your best when it matters most. And if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing so we can get these videos into the algorithm. Okay, let's dive in. We love talking about flow, being in the zone, everything clicking, your body seems to know what to do before you consciously tell it what to do. You're completely absorbed in what you're doing. For some, time speeds up. For others, time slows down. And there's a sense of control without trying to control everything. And performance can feel almost effortless. It truly is an incredible state. I've studied it, taught it, and worked with athletes to help create the conditions that make flow more likely. But here's where I think we sometimes can get it wrong. We turn flow into the goal. First, trying to get into flow may be the very thing that keeps you out of it. The moment you start chasing it, forcing it, or evaluating whether you're in flow, you're doing the exact opposite of what flow requires. Also, with flow as the goal, athletes start believing that if performance doesn't feel effortless, automatic, confident, and completely in control, something is wrong. It's not. In fact, sports psychology research gives us another way of understanding exceptional performance under pressure. It's called clutch state. And today I want to talk about flow, clutch, and two other states that don't get nearly enough respect, in my humble opinion: arousal and control. Because you don't need to feel your best to perform your best, and you certainly don't need to be in flow. Flow and clutch are different. Researchers, including Christian Swan and his colleagues, have studied athletes' experiences during excellent performance and found something fascinating. Athletes describe at least two distinct states associated with high performance. One is flow. The other is clutch. Flow tends to feel automatic. You're absorbed in the experience. Action and awareness merge. You're not forcing performance. It's just happening, and you're allowing it to happen. Clutch is different. Clutch tends to happen when there is something specific that needs to be accomplished. The pressure is real, and you feel it. The outcome matters, and you know it. And instead of performance feeling effortless, the athlete may experience intense effort, deliberate concentration, heightened awareness, and a strong sense of control. You're not floating through the performance. You're working really hard. You're choosing. You're committing. You're finding a way. Think about a golfer coming to the 18th hole knowing he needs par to make the cut. A tennis player serving at 5-4 in the third set. A runner who knows the qualifying standard and realizes with 2 laps remaining that she has to move. Skier standing in the start gate knowing she only has a 1/10 of a second lead and must perform to keep her spot on the leaderboard. You might not want to become less aware in those moments. You may become more aware. You know exactly what the situation requires. Your attention narrows. Your effort increases. And you execute. That's very different from the popular image of being effortlessly in the zone. And yet, you can still perform exceptionally well. This is where Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's work gets really interesting. Most people associate Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi with flow. And understandably so, he is the founder of flow. But when I teach his work, I don't want athletes to look only at the little box that says flow, because the broader model is incredibly useful. Think about 2 dimensions, challenge and skill. When the challenge is high and your perceived skill is high, that's where flow becomes possible. But around flow, other psychological states exist. And 2 of them are especially important for performance: arousal and control. In the classic flow model, arousal sits near flow where the challenge is high, but perceived skill is not quite as high. And I want you to notice something here. That's not necessarily a bad place to be. You're stretched, the situation is demanding more from you, You may feel activated, alert, energized, maybe even uncomfortable. Probably so. And there's something about that state that I think connects nicely, not equivalently, but conceptually with the newer sports psychology research tells us about clutch performance. In clutch, the demand is high. You recognize what needs to happen, and you deliberately increase effort and concentration to meet that demand. You're literally rising to the challenge. That doesn't mean Csikszentmihalyi's arousal state and clutch state are the same psychological construct. I understand they're not. But they're putting the research side by side, and I think there's an important practical lesson here. Feeling challenged and highly activated does not mean you're outside the performance zone. You might be exactly where you need to be, even though it's not the flow zone. And then there's control. This one is equally important in my humble opinion. In Csikszentmihalyi's model, control is another state adjacent to flow. Here your perceived skill is high relative to the challenge. You've got it. You're capable. You feel comfortable and in control. But because the challenge isn't quite high enough relative to your skill, you're not necessarily being stretched into flow. And somehow we've started treating that like it's not enough. We live in a culture that constantly tells us to get uncomfortable, push harder, challenge yourself, be 1% better every day. Growth happens outside your comfort zone. And yes, if you want to improve, you eventually need challenge. But you do not need every moment of every practice, every workout, every competition, and every day of your life to push you to your edge. Control is valuable. There is valuable in doing something you're really good at and allowing yourself to feel really good at it. There is value in competence. There is value in mastery. There is value in having a practice where you don't need to prove anything or improve anything. You simply execute. Sometimes you'll need to stretch. Sometimes you need to experience the feeling of, I've got this. That's not complacency. That's a psychological resource. We've become too obsessed with optimization. I think this is especially relevant right now because athletes are surrounded by optimization. Optimize your sleep. Optimize your nutrition. Optimize your recovery. I get it. I talk about it. Optimize your training. Improve every day. Find your edge. Push the edge. And there's value in improvement. Of course there is. But human performance is not one continuous upward line. And I don't believe you need to be 1% better every single day. Some days are for growth. Some days are for recovery. Some days are for adaptation. Some days are for confidence. Some days are fun. Some days are simply for experiencing what you have already built. And if you spent years developing a skill, you're allowed to enjoy being good at that skill. You don't have to immediately make it harder. And that's where control can be so valuable. Because if we're constantly increasing the challenge the moment our skill catches up, we never allow ourselves to experience mastery. And mastery is a big part of performance too. There's also tremendous value in practicing what you already know how to do well because those are often the fundamental skills you're going to need when the pressure is highest. The best athletes in the world say it over and over again. Under pressure, it comes back to the fundamentals. So practicing in that state of control isn't wasted time because you're not pushing your edge. You're reinforcing the skills you need to trust when the stakes are high. So what state should you want? This is where I want to change the question. Instead of asking, how do I get into flow, which is a popular question, I know, ask, what does this performance require from me right now? And maybe it is flow. Maybe the challenge and the skill meet beautifully. You're absorbed, you're trusting, you're performing without forcing. Great. Don't interfere with it. Go with it. Enjoy it. But maybe you're under enormous pressure. The challenge feels slightly bigger than your current capacity. Your heart rate, it's up. You feel that intensity. You feel that activation. You know exactly what needs to happen, and I use the word need, must. And you have to deliberately concentrate and work for it. That doesn't mean you're failing to find flow. You may be setting yourself up to perform clutch. And maybe today, the challenge isn't enormous. You're prepared, you're capable, you're doing something you've done hundreds of times before. You feel comfortable, in control. Maybe you're not being stretched at all. Good. Use it. Enjoy it. Feel your competence. Build trust in yourself. Enjoy the fact that something that used to be difficult is now something you can do. Not every performance experience has to live at your edge. The same athlete can move between states. And this is another part of the clutch research I love. Flow and clutch don't necessarily describe different kinds of athletes. They can occur within the same performance and obviously with the same athlete. Imagine a marathoner. For miles, she's in rhythm. Her pace feels natural. Time has slowed down. She's not forcing anything. That's flow. Then she reaches mile 23. She's hurting. She knows the time she needs. Now, every decision becomes intentional. Hold the pace. Pump your arms. Stay tall. Catch that runner. Get to the next marker. The effort, well, it's enormous. Her concentration is deliberate. That's clutch. Same athlete, same race, different psychological demands. And then maybe during a training session earlier that week, she ran at an easy pace she knew she could handle. Relaxed, competent, comfortable, control. None of those states is inherently better. The skill is learning to recognize what state you're in and use it instead of fighting it. So here's your mental toughness moment. The next time you're performing and it doesn't feel effortless, don't immediately conclude that something is wrong. If the pressure is high and you need something specific, narrow your attention. Commit to the task. Increase your effort where you need to, where it's necessary. You don't need to feel effortless. Be clutch. And if you feel challenged, activated, and stretched, don't automatically try to calm everything down. That energy may be exactly what you need, so use it. Use the arousal. And if you're completely capable and in control, don't manufacture difficulty just because someone told you that you need to get 1% better every day. Experience your competence. Own that control. Enjoy it. There isn't one ideal psychological state we need to chase every time we perform. There are different states available to us, different demands, different moments, different ways we wake up in the day, different ways of performing exceptionally well. So yes, flow is incredible, but flow isn't the goal. Performance is. And sometimes peak performance feels effortless. Sometimes it feels intense. Sometimes it feels controlled. And sometimes you have to really fight for it. If this mental toughness moment was helpful, please like the video and subscribe for more practical sports psychology tools you can use in performance, sport, and life. And check out the descriptions and show notes below for additional resources and ways to connect directly with me. Until next time, keep training your mind as intentionally as you train everything else.